The forest had never been a welcoming place. It had always been a land marked by fear, by stories whispered in candlelight, by disappearances that accumulated over the decades without explanation. For the villagers living nearby, it was forbidden territory, an evil that had to be avoided at all costs. The disappearances were always shrouded in mystery. People vanished without a trace, and those who dared to speak about it mentioned shadows moving between the trees, whispers coming from nowhere, and a chilling cold that settled in their chests like a silent warning. The first known victim was a lumberjack whose house was found empty, the door open, and his tools scattered across the floor as if he had left in a hurry. Days later, his remains were discovered near the forest's edge, but something was wrong. His skin was marked with ancient symbols, and his expression was one of indescribable terror. Over time, the villagers began avoiding the forest, but it seemed to take on a life of its own. The wind carried wails, and the trees whispered names that no one dared acknowledge. On certain nights, silhouettes could be seen at the forest's edge, tall and thin, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. The elders spoke of a curse. They said the forest was alive, feeding on those who entered its domain. An ancient entity, forgotten by time, but never satisfied. Travelers who became lost in its depths always described the same horrors, voices calling for help, invisible footsteps following their every move, and, in the final moment, absolute silence before vanishing. Terror spread further when a group of hunters tried to recover one of their own who had disappeared days earlier. Only one returned, bloodied and delirious, babbling incoherently about trees that moved, about eyes within the mist, about something waiting patiently in the darkness. He never spoke of what he had seen again. The village emptied little by little. Those who still had their sanity left, abandoning their homes, hoping the forest would not follow them. But the truth was cruel. Once someone heard the call of the shadows, they were never safe again. It was only a matter of time before they were claimed. On the last known night in the village, a thunderclap split the sky, and the few who remained locked their doors. But nothing would stop the inevitable. The screams began shortly after midnight, followed by an eerie silence. By dawn, the village was empty. Only the forest remained, untouched, eternal. Waiting for the next soul to consume. But the forest was not content to devour only those who entered. Slowly, its influence spread beyond its borders. The winds carried a foul stench, mixed with something sweet and sickening, as if the very earth was rotting. Animals fleeing from the trees arrived in nearby lands with glazed eyes and erratic behavior. Cats meowed in distress before vanishing into the night, dogs barked at nothing, and horses refused to take certain paths, rearing up, whinnying, and backing away in sheer terror. The few who still dared to live nearby began to notice that their shadows no longer aligned with their bodies. Some stretched too far at dusk, while others seemed to move before their owners did. Mirrors became dangerous. Those who stared too long had the impression of seeing something behind them, something inching closer each time they blinked. Children started murmuring names no one had taught them, and their once innocent drawings now depicted skeletal figures lurking in dark corners. Sometimes, in the dead of night, parents awoke to the sound of childish giggles at the foot of their beds, but when they turned on the light, they found their children fast asleep. The nights grew longer. The moonlight seemed weaker, swallowed by the darkness of the trees. Candles and lanterns flickered without wind, and shadows drifted across walls even when no one moved. The old church's clock stopped working, its pendulum swinging on its own in an unnatural, broken rhythm. And then, the voices began to call. At first, a distant echo, an almost indistinguishable whisper among the rustling leaves. Then, clearer, calling the villagers by name, imitating the voices of loved ones long gone. One night, a widow, lonely and grieving, rose from her bed upon hearing her husband's voice, though he had been dead for years. She was seen walking slowly toward the forest, her nightgown trailing through the damp earth. By morning, only her footprints remained, ending abruptly at the forest's edge. The last survivors fled before the forest could claim them. The final villager to leave said that on his last night, he looked back and saw a row of pale faces among the trees, watching him. Their eyes were empty and glowing, their bodies still, waiting. He was never seen again after leaving that land. Now, only the forest remains. Growing, expanding each year. Its roots stretch beneath the earth, its branches extend like twisted fingers. Travelers passing along the old road feel something watching, an invisible weight on their shoulders, a presence that never fully reveals itself. And sometimes, as night falls, the whispers can still be heard among the trees, calling, waiting, hungry for new souls.